I tried to make a video last year after the attack on Pulse Nightclub, but I just couldn't, and I didn't really have the words to express how I feel, and I still don't, but I'm going to give it a try. I was a senior in high school on September 11th, 2001 when the attack on the World Trade Center happened. I remember the exact classroom that I was in, relatively the area that I was sitting in, but I remember my teacher turning on the news, and in retrospect, at that point in my life, I didn't know that I would one day live in New York City. I didn't know that I would set up camp with Occupy Wall Street, less than a quarter of a mile from Ground Zero. I didn't know that I would one day meet people who lived through that day in New York City, who had family and friends who died that day. What I didn't feel was connected. But for Pulse, it was different. I was connected. That was my city. Orlando was my city. I knew people who died that night at Pulse. I knew people who were supposed to be there that night at Pulse. But fate had different plans. But I also felt numb. Not numb to the sense of not wanting to accept tragedy, but numb in the sense of normalcy. And that terrified me. I can't even remember what it feels like to be at peace, and I cringe knowing that there are people that I know that have lived their entire existence with the United States being at war. And not only are we at war on a global scale, we still have so many internal domestic battles that we're fighting. I have read stories about some of the victims at Pulse Nightclub, and some of their parents didn't even want to claim their bodies because they found out that they were gay through their death. My LGBTQA+ friends are still struggling, and we have to be there to help fight with them. Now, there were 49 victims, and there were tons of commemorations all over, the United States, all over the world. Everybody was saying, "We are Orlando, Orlando strong." But what is the difference between them losing their lives by a man who decided to go on a rampage versus victims of police brutality and police murder? What is the difference between these 49 victims at this club and people in Syria and Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the globe where the United States is bombing people? What is the difference? And the difference is that victims of police brutality are victims of people with a gun and a badge. The victims in Syria and Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, all over the globe, they're the victims of US soldiers in uniform. That says that when you have a badge and a gun and you're a police officer or you're a US soldier, you have a license to kill, and you can do it legally, and they will run the victims through the ringer and say that they deserved it or they were collateral damage. And this needs to stop, and we need to point this shit out, and we need to recognize it. They try to make us fearful of the wrong people. We need to recognize the value of human life. We need to take this time to reevaluate within ourselves how it is that we let media manipulate us. Recognize your actions, recognize your thoughts. You do not have to believe your own thoughts. That is one of the most important things that I have ever learned, is that just because we're conditioned into thinking a certain way doesn't mean we have to act on those thoughts. We need to recognize them when they happen and say, I don't want to think like that. People who die here in the United States from terrorism are super important. We must say their names. But we also must say the names of people around the globe. And we also must recognize what terrorism is. What happened at Pulse Nightclub was terrorism. What's happening to Black and brown people by the police in this country is terrorism. And I'm not saying that the United States has a monopoly on terrorism. We certainly do not. There are plenty of other factions in other countries who commit terrorism as well. It's not easy. We have to have these conversations and we have to stand up. That's the only way that this is going to change. If we stand back and we're complacent, this will continue, and it won't just continue, but it will get worse. I would like to show a montage of the video that I took while down at Pulse Nightclub the day before the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse Nightclub shooting, as well as the 1-year anniversary celebration of life that took place at Lake Eola in downtown Orlando. I love you all, and together we can change this, but we have to be brave. Courage is contagious, but sometimes we have to take the first step.
Will soon become a makeshift memorial with thousands of flowers and words of remembrances and messages from all over the world. That homeless man on the bench there is Mr. Bucky. On Monday night, he'll be relighting the countless candles that will be lit on that lawn tomorrow night. The sidewalk where Greg Zanis will place the 49 crosses that he'll begin making tomorrow morning after church in his hometown in Illinois. He'll be driving 1,200 miles to deliver them. Going to be Latin night tonight. Tomorrow there will be a countless number of cell phones ringing inside of there. Ringing over and over and over. At night it lights up like a rainbow.